A very strange consideration I have to make constantly when writing this show that might not be immediately obvious is hubris. I have a lot of enthusiasm and confidence in my love of video games, and belief that they are an aggressively positive force in the world. Yet, I also know that the classic reputation of games is a negative one. While these stereotypes do seem to be fading, growing up, gaming was for losers, for nerds, they were somehow the obvious cause of mass shootings, and there are certainly elements of gaming that I still don't think are worth celebrating, like how their addictive nature can compel people to make poor choices, or how they can promote overly reclusive and sedentary lifestyles. But more directly on the point of hubris, I have to consider my own experience with gaming so carefully when crafting the tone of this show. For example, I'm going to say something extremely hubristic, even though it is more or less a fact of my lived experience. I have never met someone my age who has played more video games than me. That's been true since I was in my mid-teens or so. To be clear, there are tons of people my age who have played more video games than me. My life just hasn't steered me in a direction to where I have met people like that very often. So, while that statement is a truth, my brain obviously recognizes that it is a very arrogant thing to believe, and my internal desire to remain measured and humble begins to counter that thought. Despite how many games I've played, there are so many genres that I've barely dipped my toe in, like strategy games, simulators, MOBAs, or heck, even mobile gaming, the biggest sector of gaming that exists. Throughout this show, there have been several times where this dynamic has presented itself. I know a lot about video games, and that shapes my opinions on them. But also, I'm in my heckin' 20s, how much could I really know? There are games I love more than perhaps the average consumer would because they felt like a breath of fresh air for me. There are super high quality games that didn't hit particularly hard for me because I've had similar experiences before. Does this mean I'm disconnected from general gaming audiences? Is it worth learning so much about a medium to the point that you don't even experience the medium the way most people do? Heck, this doesn't just make this a hard show to write. It makes it so that I don't really like talking to people in everyday life about video games unless they're like super casual that I know they don't really care that much. I sometimes feel as if I'm just not on the same page as a lot of other people who love this medium in the exact same way I do. I have to stress at this point that these are thoughts I work through, not realities I actually live. I don't actively avoid talking about video games with people. I don't put myself down for not playing enough sports simulators, just as I don't build myself up for having played 30% more Mario spin-offs than the guy next to me. Have I played so many games that I've really seen it all? Have I learned so much that I'm not relatable when talking about games anymore? Heck, even take that social aspect out of it. Even if I love video games just the same as ever, will I ever be able to play another video game that felt like a truly new and inspiring experience like when I first started exploring games as a kid? Well, in early 2020, I started seeing occasional tweets from a publisher about an upcoming game that wasn't really getting any buzz. But it caught my eye pretty instantly. I couldn't even tell you why necessarily. Just kind of a gut feeling. Gut feelings are things I don't often latch onto, but for some reason, this time, I did. I got the game on launch day, and if we can hit the note of hubris one last time, I take a little pride in the fact that the biggest gut feeling I've ever had in gaming paid off harder than I ever could have expected. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim showed me the infinite possibilities of games. It's a one-of-a-kind and impossible to imitate game. There are no other games like it, and there probably never will be again. If you want to play it, it has to be now. That is exactly how 13 Sentinels makes me feel, but those are not my words. That's actually what Masahiro Sakurai wrote about the game upon finishing it. He simply said it better and more succinctly than I ever could. He also said you cannot watch this game online and get the experience, which is more true for this game than pretty much any other. And Yoko Taro also came out to praise the game, saying that just one more copy makes a difference and he believes Japan needs this developer. If it sounds like I'm turning this segment into an advertisement, I'm not! I hate when this show sounds like I'm just trying to write an advertisement for these games, but it's not me doing the pitching this time. It's two of the greatest game directors alive. I'm just passing along the message as a testimonial. Now I need to say something negative to counteract how sales pitchy that all sounded. I'm mad this soundtrack was never put on Spotify or the arrangement album. 13 Sentinels is a game that defies genre. If you put a gun to my head, I'd tell you it's a marriage of strategy games, tactical RPGs, point-and-click adventure games, and the entire history of the science fiction genre of storytelling. But even that I don't want to stand behind, because I don't want to give people the excuse to be like, oh, I don't like point-and-click adventure games, or I don't like strategy games, so I wouldn't like 13 Sentinels. No! If you're a purveyor of the belief that we put too much stock in genre titles as a culture, 13 Sentinels is your strongest soldier. The extremely modern take on tactical gameplay feels so much more visceral and involved compared to many games in that genre, which often come across as just digital board games. The story sequences are so thoughtful of your time as a player. They never drag on. There's a simple yet awesome mechanic that helps you catch up on story elements for this extremely complicated plot. And in my opinion, Vanillaware's signature art style has never looked better. This is one of the only video games I've ever played where I consistently found myself taking screenshots. But really, the dominant genre here is science fiction. This game has an obvious, eager love for the genre's history that it is happy to flaunt in your face. It is shocking how many different types of sci-fi storytelling make their way into this game, many of which are explored with a shocking amount of depth that the game isn't braggadocious about. I'm so used to media in our current landscape practically shouting at the screen when it's doing something cool or smart or emotional. For how unique and complicated 13 Sentinels is, I think it's its own subtlety and the way it chooses to be quiet that makes it so captivating to continually think about. This could have been the most pretentious game on the planet, and in the end it couldn't be further from that. Heck, look at how standard our cast of characters looks. I love this. You might have noticed at this point that I love embracing normal people and their beautiful, messy normalness, not having to dress them up in a bunch of style. The fact that we've got all normal uniforms and casual wear and natural hair colors makes this cast feel so incredibly human to me, despite the utterly bizarre circumstances they find themselves in. Really smart choice with the character design there. Question for you. Does it feel like I'm being more vague than usual? Because I am definitely trying to be. The fact of the matter is that if you haven't played this game, then you likely know next to nothing about it. Through some exceptionally positive word of mouth, like the testimonials I shared earlier, this game has grown into a modest sleeper hit. Despite launching to a rough start, 13 Sentinels slowly but surely climbed its way to a well-earned 7-figure unit sales number. But it did that over time, and pretty much just through word of mouth. It never had some huge moment in the sun. It wasn't trendy. So yeah, to the majority of people watching who haven't played this game yet, I don't want to give you really anything additional about it that you don't know already. I really do believe what Sakurai was getting at. If you want to play it, sooner is so much better than later. But in the top 10, I am allowed to talk spoilers, and while I will not share a single plot point in this segment, there is one element of the game I need to mention. But honestly, if you haven't played 13 Sentinels yet, especially if you would like to, just stop watching now. No need to have any more info than you already do. That said, we talked about just 2 segments ago how much I love not having a clear protagonist, so that rules. But man, does this game take that further. Not having a protagonist? That's one thing. 13 Sentinels doesn't have a chronology. Each of the 13 protagonists have their own story divided up into episodes, and you get to more or less choose the order you view things. You're experiencing one character's story, but you might learn information that intrigues you to pursue that information in another character's story. You might meet a new character that unlocks a new story, or you might just be blocked off from progressing until you learn enough new information. In no game has unlocking information been more fun for me than 13 Sentinels. Not only is the story delivered non-linearly, but the timeline of the story itself is all over the place. Like I said, pretty much all kinds of sci-fi are present, meaning time travel is in the picture. Modern day, World War II, distant future, all of that, while digesting 13 different stories, and that's not even all of what makes this a complicated anthology to digest. Those are just the parts I feel like I have to mention, otherwise the video would feel incomplete. Putting the pieces together of exactly when, how, and why things happen is one of the greatest sources of fun for me in 13 Sentinels. It's far from the only game where figuring out the context of events is important and fun, but it is the game that far and away does it the best that I've seen. Like, Good lord, it's not even close. I really mean it when I say that 13 Sentinels is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given in this medium. It is a great story, I love these characters, the gameplay feels fun and impactful, I love this soundtrack. In fact, this game has one of my favorite musical moments in a game ever, if you know, you know. But so much more important than any of that, it showed me that I haven't seen everything yet. More importantly still, it proved that gaming has yet to reach its full potential. There are still bold, new ways to explore this space that we've barely scratched the surface of. I don't feel sentiments like this often, but I really do hope the game industry took notes on 13 Sentinels. I know this game gets brought up enough in conversations surrounding the greatest games of all time that at least some people are certainly paying attention. I hope that's the case, because honestly, this game makes everything else feel blasé, stale, and uncreative in comparison. Sorry to the 7 other games I apparently like more than this one.